Right.
Gotta post that on Twitter. Hey, anybody not gonna take my picture?
Shall I take a picture for him?
Wave everyone.
Turn all my devices off. As my phone goes off. Oh wait, I need to send myself in here. There's only one person in your time wanting.
Hello. Good afternoon. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. As we reflect on the words of Frederick Douglass, I would like to say good afternoon and welcome to our Unity Through Dialogue Community and Policing panel. I'm grateful to be in the presence of such eager minds here at Ivy Tech. Sometimes dialogue, especially tough dialogue, is a struggle before progress. So on the heels of this event, as your SGA Diversity Senator, I will host a town hall meeting Thursday, March 9th, 10 to 10:50 a.m. to continue said discussion started today. I would like to thank all students, faculty, staff, and community for being here, while also acknowledging the support and guidance of our Chancellor and her leadership team. A special thank you goes to our Regional Diversity Committee and SOB for sponsoring today's talk, but also the distinguished guests from the community comprising today's panel. Let me not forget moderating today one of Ivy Tech's own, a man who is a brilliant resource, Dr. Law, current chair of the Criminal and Paralegal divisions, along with Legal Studies program, but most impressively is someone who spent 20 years in a centered, unapologetic, and purposeful pursuit of civil rights for all those in our nation, but also right here in our community. Please join me in welcoming today's moderator, Professor Lonnie T. Cooper.
Thank you very much. Just so we clear up something to begin with, and Professor Richard Pearson and myself don't get in trouble in the next couple of days, for all of my students that I said I would give you 10 points, extra credit points for being here, and for Professor Pearson's students, who he said would give 15 points. Professor Ogle, are you here? Jamie? We're going to have to give 20 points like she is, so we don't get in any trouble, all right? So everybody that's here gets 20 points no matter what class. Yeah. Oh, that's right, and Sheriff Luke. So everybody gets 20 points. Let me... You're not teaching this time. Okay, that's all right. Let me introduce some of our panelists. Most of them I know really well. And we'll make it rather short, but just so you have a sense of who's here, what their background and experience is, and we have such an incredible diversity and high caliber of panelists. First on the list, Judge Vicki Carmichael. She is the judge of Clark County Circuit Court number 4. She handled serious felonies, a civil docket, but she's here in particular today because she has exclusive juvenile court jurisdiction for anything in Clark County that has to do with juvenile offenders or juvenile court. She is the judge for that. Also, we're very happy to have Christopher Duex with us, a community activist, a community leader in both Louisville, and we find out, am I getting this right? A graduate of Jeffersonville High School, 1978. Yeah. 1978. So we brought him back across the river to be with us today. Miss Anta Fields is the current and for many years in the past president of the Clark County NAACP. She worked out at Horseshoe Casino where she dealt a lot with diversity issues and brought a lot of money from the Horseshoe back into the community in programs that help alleviate some of the inequities that exist. We have Colonel Kenny Cavanaugh, who is the Chief of Police for Jeffersonville Police Department. I've known Kenny all the way back before he had do you have those scrambled eggs on your uniform and stuff? Being Chief? Yeah, and we're really proud of Kenny, and he has a lot of input. In particular, one program I think you probably already know I'm going to ask you about is the Citizens Academy. Some of the innovative efforts that different police departments, law enforcement agencies have tried to implement to bring the community and the police closer together. We have Sheriff Frank Luke, who is also an adjunct professor here at Ivy Tech and is sheriff in Floyd County. Polices an area much different from metropolitan Jeffersonville, and I'll get back to Professor Pearson in a minute. introducing him, and a good round of perspective in that. And Sheriff Luke has a well-rounded experience in a lot of different areas that he brings to the table. We have retired lieutenant from the Louisville Metro Police Department, also faculty member here at Ivy Tech now, Richard Pearson, who has, we have agreed, 20 points, correct, Richard? And spent an awful lot of his time in the Metro Police in the narcotics enforcement. And so many things come back to the scourge of drugs. I spent, out of my 20 years in law enforcement, I spent about 13 of those years in the war on crime. And if we don't do something different than we've been doing, we'll never win that war. We certainly aren't now. And last but not least, and I'm incredibly excited to have Sheldon McElroy. And because I didn't know Mr. McElroy very well, I asked him for a bio, and I'm going to read just the first paragraph of that bio, and you get a sense of the balance and the diversity that we have on this panel. Mr. McElroy's bio says, catapulted by the experiences in the foster care system and entanglements of the criminal justice system. Mr. McElroy has dedicated his life to making systemic change through his work with individuals out of self-preservation and the preservation of his community, which is the Metro Louisville area, and serves currently in a full-time capacity following those dreams as a working environment and very much in his personal and professional life. We've got an excellent panel here today. Let me kind of put out some ground rules. There's a format we're going to try to follow. Especially you students again, let me compliment you. You sent us some incredibly insightful and important questions. We're going to try to get to as many of those as we possibly can. The first round of questions, we have particular questions for each panelist, 2 of those, that are very specific based on their background and experience. And after those 2 questions, then I will ask some of the other questions that were submitted and just ask our panelists which one of them may wish to, in fact, address those questions. Is our intern here for the 3x5 cards? Okay. If you have a question, she has some 3x5 cards, a pen, she has paper. If you have a question that comes up, just give her a nod. She'll write down the questions, and hopefully we'll get to some of those too as the discussion develops. All right? So, first question, first up, is Judge Vicki Carmichael. I didn't mention you're at the top of the list.
You did not.
You're at the top of the list. All right. Because you have exclusive juvenile jurisdiction in the Clark County courts, what role does the circuit court, the court system play, particularly in your court, circuit court number 4, in the relations between the community and the criminal justice system, which entails the police, the courts, and as you oftentimes have to sentence people in the correctional department? What role does circuit court number 4 play that?
So one of the roles that I have as the judge of the excluded juvenile jurisdiction in Clark County is to try to work with the community, including the police officers, in handling juvenile offenders. And one of the things that I started when I took office in 2007 was what we call the Youth Roundtable. And so each month we have a roundtable discussion. And what I do is I bring in probation officers, prosecutors, public defenders, police officers, school resource officers, and other service providers. I include the Department of Child Services in that. I include all of the service providers in the community, Child Place, Noah's Ark anymore, Family Ark, Family Time, different community providers who are helping juveniles and families in Clark County. And we meet once a month to discuss any new programs that are going on, any issues that the police are having, any issues that the schools are having. And so we try to build that community consensus around what we think is appropriate for juveniles in our community. And we work with not only law enforcement, but other service providers to address those issues and to try to help law enforcement address those issues with juveniles specifically.
Thank you, Judge Carmichael. Christopher Truex. Now, I'll go back to this. We're really proud of, as a young man from Jeffersonville, okay? Tell us about, and I think, although we made that joke about the students and the number of extra points they get for being here, many of these students are here because they're interested and they have a heartfelt desire to have some involvement. So maybe you can give them some direction. Tell us about how you first became involved in community advocacy work and how our students might also get involved today.
Well, and Lonnie, I'm glad you asked that question, and thanks for the invite. 2004, and let me kind of give you all a heads up on something. Michelle Hemingway, who I met around 05, when she used to work at the Muhammad Ali Center, starting, when the center was first launched. We befriended each other. She's here at Ivy Tech now. I'm glad she's here with you all, but I told her that I had got a message the other day from the family of William Young Jr. Now, he was just recently killed in Metro Louisville in a police-involved shooting. It's still an ongoing situation, and the investigation is where it's at. But it goes back to Lonnie's question. When I first met, to my right, you all left, Lieutenant Rich Pearson, or Professor Pearson. When we first met, we were dealing with a police-involved shooting incident in Western Louisville in January of 04. That was actually in the division where he was at, which is the 1st Division. And that was connected to a 19-year-old black male by the name of Michael Newby and a white Metro Police detective by the name of Mackenzie Manning. And that kind of started my community, let me say this, more visible presence as it relates to what that shooting entailed. I was already working for almost 5 years on the ground with different organizations, just promoting hope, some level of healing, mercy, and compassion in the neighborhoods as related to just, black on black violence issues. But when this police-involved shooting came up, it started a more prominent kind of connection with the community and everything that entailed. And so the wrap-up for you all basically is, if you're ever interested in advocacy work from different angles in the community, way that I looked at that police-involved shooting, the way that we had such a tension-filled kind of emotional roller coaster connection to the whole idea of a 19-year-old black losing his life to a police-involved shooting as it related to a white detective. I always coined that, and I always will coin that as, it was almost our Ferguson before the Ferguson. That's how volatile it was. But through good peace advocacy efforts from a mother who was the mother of the young man that lost his life, and her very adamant attitude to not want to see any more bloodshed as it related to this issue. It had, every, conversation was about kind of drawing the line on race issues and everything else. Peace advocacy was a comforting factor that engaged me more and more to try to make sure that I personally had a stake in trying to at least get to the truth. But at the same time, the truth is hard when you have to confront it. But I think at the end of the day, all of us look for peace and purpose. So that's what I would say to your students, Lonnie, is that all of you all look for peace and purpose in the work that you're about to embark in, whether it's professional or some social connection in the community to try to make a big difference.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Answer Fields. We know that poverty and other social economic factors have a strong influence on how our communities thrive or don't thrive in many ways. What effect do those factors have on how low-income communities interact with the police?
It has a great impact. First of all, you must look back historically and systemically at the relations with the police in lower economic communities. The history cannot be denied that these communities may be lacking in certain socioeconomic factors, but at the same time, they are human beings. And historically, the police have gone into these communities and have not respected these citizens as they have citizens of affluent backgrounds. So there is a lack of communication, there is a total breakdown, there is mistrust, and because of a lack of education, there is no outreach, there is no communication, and there is no dialogue. So we must do some kind of outreach into these socioeconomically deprived communities to begin communications, to begin dialogue, or we will always have a broken system.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you. Chief Kavanaugh, tell us about, and very interested in this, you and I talked about it at a current community event a couple of months ago. Tell us about the Jeffersonville Police Department Citizens Academy.
We conduct a 12-week Citizens of Police Academy. That is an overview and what we use as a comprehensive look and view for citizens that come into the Jeffersonville Police Department to see how we're operating in everyday fashion. We utilize our instructors of the department that conduct training. They're certified Indiana Law Enforcement Academy instructors, but we give you an overall view of the patrol, which is the baseline services. Also, we utilize the investigations. We also show the crisis intervention teams. We show all the specialty units of SWAT that are part of the Jeffersonville Police Department, and we utilize those instructors during a 12-week course, which is approximately 2.5 hours, 3 hours each night. It's 2 days a week. It's not to make anyone a reserve police officer, to empower anyone, but it's to show and it's to give you a snippet, a tidbit of the training that the officers actually go through, and then we actually do field surveys where we actually allow the public to go out and participate with our river patrol unit. They actually go out and they ride with the officers involved. They actually come in and they actually see the records department divisions that do support the police department in every way fashion. But it's an opportunity to look inside and see what the Jeffersonville Police Department is actually doing, but what law enforcement is doing in the community every day. This program is part of our outreach. This program is a part of us as a police department showing the citizens of Jeffersonville, but Clark County, how we're interacting with the public. Coming out of that training, what is the outcome that we're looking for? The outcome that we're looking for is for citizens to know and to have an idea exactly what's going on both sides of the coin. But to leave those questions that are unanswered, we're trying to close that gap. We're trying to take that door and get that door further open. That way we can dispense our information out and the public can see exactly what's going on a daily basis. And
are you finding that as the community civilians, sorry to use that term, you fall back on these, those civilians, when they better understand exactly what the police department does and things that you don't ever see on the 10 o'clock news, that understanding helps bring the police and the community closer together?
Yes, it's giving the panoramic view. It's opening, it's being wider, and what it is, it's actually us showing. There's a lot of times you'll see two police cars with one car stopped. Why is the second car there? After going through the training to look to see, it's there for the purpose and intention. It's not intimidation, but just to make sure you have a second officer there. An officer there is covered, but another set of eyes, another set of ears. And understand it's the eyes and ears on the police officer side, but it's something to it as well that there's injection from the second officer to the first officer to stop before taking action. And that's another brain that you're actually you're putting there to be involved. And it's just those small features that we're able to actually highlight and show during the Citizens Academy that we can bring more light and we can answer those questions and not leave that out there just in the open.
Thank you. Sheriff Luke, do you believe that as the top law enforcement officer in Floyd County, that cultural competency training should be a required component of police academy, police training in general?
I do believe that, and it's actually a requirement in Indiana for law enforcement. So we do train on that each year. And we try to open it up so that it's not just a black and white issue, it's a religious issue, it's whatever is represented in our community. This year, our diversity consisted of the different poverty issues, and so that when officers do go to a home, that they understand the different levels of poverty and why those people may do or not do certain things that maybe the officers never experienced in their life. So it's much more than a black and white issue to us, but we cover that as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McElroy, from the community standpoint, your experience both in your self-advocacy and your professional position, what are some of the barriers that you see or have experienced in good police-community relations?
Yeah, so I think sometimes the most obvious is the least obvious. And we focus these conversations on police. However, the police are carrying out what we, the people, have decided we wanted as a priority. So the conversation isn't so much about the police, but about what have we decided we want to do to control maybe community poverty, legislation, and policymakers have designed, because the people that live in this community didn't design out the way in which those communities are developed. And so obviously those communities become very much policed because you have poverty on top of poverty on top of poverty, which creates environments that are detrimental. So once there was a Roman general who was taking over a province, and even some of his own soldiers were killed in this process. Solitudium falciet pace compellum. They create desolation and peace. We don't in the East having a prison population of 300,000 to now we're over 3.5 million in prison and probation and parole. So 1 out of every 35 people. And we don't even think about the impact of what that means to children. Because there's a child that's sitting in this campus today. And so we've decided that prison is going to be our answer to mental health, that prison is going to be our answer to solving poverty issues. If somebody has an issue socially, we don't send a social worker out, we send a police officer out, right? And those police officers do hold within their powers the force of life or death. And so oftentimes, even for the crime of resisting arrest, we see capital punishment happen immediately without a judge, jury. But they're only carrying out our wishes. This is not a police issue. This is a when do we decide as a human population that we're going to be more humane in the way we treat people.
Thank you. Professor Pearson, I know just in the past couple of years you've retired from the Louisville Police Department, and I know that they are in the process of trying to hire new officers, and there's evidently some difficulty with that. What are some of the challenges in recruiting and hiring minority officers or even non-minority officers with an attitude that seems most appropriate, that you want police officers out on the street with?
First of all, when Lonnie was talking earlier about the 20 points of extra credit, to my students, don't expect 20 points of extra credit. Get that out there first. But to address your question about the challenges of recruiting, not only minority candidates to the police department, but good candidates in general, there's a lot of impediments that have come up to challenges to that over the last 15 to 20 years. First of all, this negative perception amongst the public about the police. And this negative perception has come from some grassroots issues of how police deal with citizens on the street on a day-to-day basis. It's also come from many of the high-profile incidents we've seen across the country where police had to use force on the citizen and how that was perceived. And I think oftentimes the general public doesn't get the correct information on these incidents because all you know about it is what you hear from the media. Well, I can tell you from personal experience, don't always trust everything you see in the media. Sometimes they add things, sometimes they don't put things in there that need to be in there. But you only get a one-dimensional perspective when you see these high-profile incidents on the news and you think, oh, there they go again. But you don't know everything that led up to that point. And these high-profile incidents definitely play into the public perception, and that has definitely impacted our recruiting efforts over the last couple of decades. Media, in and of themselves, has really impacted recruiting for the police because they proliferate that negative perception amongst police. When you don't see all the good things on the news that police officers do, and there are several million contacts between citizens and police every year, millions and millions of individual contacts. But you only hear about the ones, the 4 or 5 or 10 per year when something goes wrong, where there's an ugly incident. You don't hear about the other 999,000 some odd incidents where everything goes smoothly, everybody's happy, everything gets taken care of. You don't hear about those. So that factors into some of the problems we've been having with recruiting. We've also had a reduced pool of qualified applicants. The recent epidemic of heroin, and that is the proper way to pronounce it from an old police point of view. This epidemic of heroin and other drugs, crack, meth, things of this nature, reduces the overall pool of qualified applicants for the police department. Because if you do hard drugs, then that kind of nixes you from putting in for the police department for at least 10 years. The proliferation and the acceptance of marijuana usage has excluded many people from putting in for the police department, because if you smoke a joint on Monday, you can't really go and put in for the police department on Wednesday. It just doesn't work that way. This new requirement by many of the larger police departments that applicants have at least 60 college credit hours, that has really impacted the amount or the number of good qualified applicants who decide to put in for the police department. When I came through years and years and years ago, all you needed was a high school diploma and a clean record, which I had. When I put in for the police department, 3,000 people, about 3,100 actually, put in for 40 spots. That's the type of response we were getting. Now, when the police department opens up vacancies or opens up to take in applications, they may get a few hundred. And of those few hundred, you have to deal with people who have criminal backgrounds that might exclude them, drug usage that might exclude them, and other societal and social issues that might exclude them, like domestic violence issues, things of this nature. So there's a lot of things that play into our recruiting efforts. And the fact that we've been in a constant state of war since 2001 has really brought down the qualified pool of applicants, because a lot of the people that would otherwise put in for the police department are fighting the war. And we can see this in enrollment in colleges across the country. When the economy is good, people don't typically want to go to college. Same thing with the police department. When the economy is good, they seek other opportunities. When there's a downturn in the economy, people put in for jobs that are there, such as the police department. They go back to school to increase or create a job skill set for themselves. As the economy gets better, the qualified pool of applicants goes down. So there's a lot of things that plays into why not many people, or not as many people, are putting in for a police department. And in Louisville, there is, as Inta was saying, there is a lack of communication. There is a major breakdown in communication between the police and the public. And it's not one-sided. This is a lack of communication going both ways. People don't want to talk to the police, and the police are just human beings, just like everybody else. And the police have to realize that they need to come off as human beings and speak to people as human beings. When I was still in the police department, I would have rookies that would be what we call badge heavy.
Still use that term.
Still use that term. They were always puffed up. Their tail feathers puffed up all the time. And I would say to them, why is it that you do? Because I didn't want to alienate the officer as well. But I would say to them, why are you doing that? These people just want to talk to you and try to work some things out. But the lack of communication, as several members of the panel have said, all these things play into why we're having a difficult time recruiting, not only with LMPD, but police department.
Thanks, Richard. That makes me remember how little things change and how much things can change. That badge heavy, personally, I never succumbed to that. My first job as a police officer, I was 5'9"3/4, and I weighed 135 pounds. And I didn't think the badge added anything to that, so I was called Mr. Officer Friendly. All right. Back to you, Judge Carmichael. The judicial system, you and 3 other judges, and 2, and hopefully in the not too distant future, a 3rd magistrate, are the judicial system here in Clark County. What do you all, and each court has a somewhat different responsibility in the cases they hear. What do you all do as that criminal justice component, the judicial system, to work with local law enforcement towards building this community relations?
I think one of the things that all of the judges in Clark County and even in Floyd County do is try to reach out and do outreach in education and in communication. Because again, I think everybody up here has talked about that communication is so important. And so when we as judges receive police reports and have to determine probable cause, if we don't decide there's probable cause, we need to explain that to the officer. And I think a lot of times that's been lacking, and police officers think, well, that judge just isn't going to sign anything I put in front of her or him. And that's not true. Part of it is simply education. And I think one of the things that we try to do as judges is work with our prosecutor's office. The prosecutor does a lot of the education with police officers. And I think our prosecutor has been very open to taking our message back to the police officers. And we're obviously very open to meeting with police officers individually or as groups, which we have done in different settings, to tell them what we're looking for, what we need to find as judges, what needs to be in those police reports, what needs to be in there. Because again, even with trials, when police officers come in to testify, and Sheriff was talking about this earlier, that the police officers need to know how to testify. And one of the things that we have here at Ivy Tech is that great courtroom upstairs that we can use for training and put police officers on the stand, put probation officers, I saw one of my probation officers come in earlier, put probation officers on the stand and show them how to testify. And so again, I think it's a lot about communication and education. And so that's what we as judges try to do.
Christopher, you have a lot of particular circumstances, incidents, and quite a few years of experience. In that experience, what have you seen that works best to promote a more collaborative relationship between the police departments and the community?
Excellent question, and I'll start with Ferguson, Missouri. I went to Ferguson on 6 different occasions. Met with Mike Brown Sr., Mike Brown Jr.'s dad, spent quality time with his cousins, invited them into Louisville after the 2nd round of riots to hold a forum at the Chestnut Street YMCA facility, standing room only. And what I learned in Ferguson is no different than what I experienced on the streets of Louisville, that when mistrust runs rampant in neighborhoods, whether that's officers encountering some cultural differences in the way that they feel about how they want to be respected, and those young individuals in those neighborhoods have set up kind of this mindset of the way they want to be respected, how they look at life, and when the mistrust and the level of respect is not there, then you have these volatile situations. And it's obvious to me, clear cut, and I'll give you kind of 2 quick examples. The William Young Jr. shooting. What I failed to say a while ago is that when I leave here, I'm going to his memorial service. That is no disrespect against the police department, because when Peter Grignon lost his life, the last LMPD officer lost his life, I talked to his father. I've interacted with officers over the years. It's about understanding that human life is something that we need to try to at least let others know that we're there to understand that circumstances are unfortunate, but at the same time, we don't want to see human life lost. At the end of the day, this mistrust issue, with the Darnell Wicker shooting, it's still in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office right now. If they're shooting justified or not, you've got people on both sides of the issues that look at it in different ways. And we'll find out if there's justified shooting that happened in August of 2016 that's pending right now. The bottom line is that respect gets us there. When we work harder towards respecting each other and coexisting, not on a lovey-dovey basis, but coexisting for the benefit, especially of the children and those individuals who want some level of peace in their neighborhoods, that works best, because those are some of the best practices. When I can look at a Lieutenant Pearson, a former LMPD officer who I befriended years ago, even in the midst of being close to Michael Newby's family involved in a police-involved shooting situation. The family respected my presence with having interactions with him and others, and still dealing with the issue of was the shooting justified or not. It's about being courageous enough to let people know that at the end of the day, when we get through the chaos, how do we get back to some level of coexistence with each other?
Thank you very much. Anthony, what are some of the activities that the NAACP locally, nationally, Floyd County participates in regarding police-community relations?
Lonnie, we have been charged by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, nationally and internationally, to interact and work with our police departments. First of all, I'd like to say that the Clark County, Jeffersonville, Indiana Police Department is an outstanding example that we highly advocate in our community. Is the Jeffersonville Police Department Citizens Academy. I think that's so good working both ways. It opens up dialogue. It improves community relations between the people in all aspects of the community and its police department. And I'm very proud to say today that we have two in our audience who graduated from the very first Jeffersonville Police Academy. And I'm going to ask them to stand.
Yeah, please.
That's Ronald Fields, please stand. And Faye Allen.
We give them a round of applause.
We also are so proud of the Jeffersonville Police Citizens Academy that they did receive an award several years ago at our annual Freedom Fund banquet. These are the types of programs throughout the United States that all NAACP chapters are embracing, because it does bring about a better understanding, more community awareness both ways from the police and the citizens. And it also gives people an opportunity who may have some mistrust that can start to be dispelled, and then we can start working towards a more amicable policing in various communities. Must say that Jeffersonville and Clark County, I'm sure Floyd County and the other surrounding police departments are very thankful that we have not appeared on the local or the national news for tragedies. But we're taking baby steps, and we're moving forward to those things that will benefit the entire community. Those are maybe socioeconomic disadvantages, or affluent communities. We can always come together for the betterment of an entire community once we actually start communicating with each other. Communication and education is just essential.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. And Chief Kavanaugh, I kind of meant to put this up at the top, but there's so many different definitions. I guess it's okay to ask you at this juncture. From your experience, you heading the Jeffersonville Police Department, put a definition or put some additional information or explanation on what exactly do you think we're talking about when we talk about police and community relations? What kind of a definition? And I know there's a lot out there from different perspectives, but from a law enforcement perspective, help the audience better understand exactly what we're talking about there.
Well, it's twofold. Community policing and the It's something that you're hearing more. It came about there in the 90s. Then it surfaced. We had some of the shootings that's happened and occurred. But it's about the partnerships, and it's about building trust. Part of the 21st century policing plan, the first thing that's on there is the partnership and the building the trust in the communities. As a police department, you're only as strong as your community allows you to be, but working with your community and having that community trust. That's something that we try to do here at Jeffersonville Police Department, but not Jeffersonville and Clark County and Southern Indiana. It's important that we are reaching out to the community and letting everyone know that we're policing your community for you, not for ourselves, not for our personal indifferences, but we're enforcing a law, we're policing it for our community, for our citizens, and that is everyone, that is a whole. You go into different parts and different sectors, and different developments of the city, and you need to take different approaches. And I think through the narrative of policing, we as police officers, we've been at fault of not doing that, not recognizing the situations that we're in at the time. And we get to some of the situations that happen and occur, and then the information is spelled out, and it's not the way or the intentions that it was depicted to be, but however, that is what the outcome is, and that is what the perception is. So perception is reality. But getting back here, and I'm getting a little bit off base, community policing is about the partnerships in the organization, and it's about reaching out and collaborating together. Without doing that, you're going to have confusion, and some communities, unfortunately, we've seen that around the country, there's mad confusion. And we are very privileged that we've not experienced some of the situations that have happened occurred around in different regions of the country, but I will tell you this, we are only one decision away of one suspect and one patrolman meeting together in that encounter, and everyone's scared. So just remember that, and then we have the outcome, we have to deal with it.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Sheriff, you've thrown me off too. You answered question 1 and 2 in your answer for question 1. So I'm going to throw you a little bit of a loose ball here. But it's along that same question about training police officers to be more sensitive, to understand communities are different than perhaps the communities they grew up in. And one of the hot topic items today, and has been for several years, is the issue of mandatory, voluntary, good idea, bad idea with police wearing body cameras.
Wrong guy to ask.
Yeah,
I'm not a fan of body cameras.
Yeah.
Because there's an awful lot of good police officers out there that don't need to be second guessed. If I'm sitting here next to Shelton and we're talking and something happens over here, when was I supposed to reach down and click my camera on? And when was I supposed to remember? And so there's good officers that are being scrutinized because they failed to just push the button. It wasn't on purpose. It's just that things happen so fast. You know, just yesterday I'm driving down the road and I look up and I witness a girl smack into the guardrail, come spinning around, and a semi run into her. Now, was I supposed to, at that time that I'm witnessing that and I'm avoiding the debris flying up, am I supposed to reach down and push a button? No, I don't want to do that. And so, and then the scrutiny that comes on top of that is unfunded. There's no money for cameras. I'm having a hard time paying for gasoline. I don't have enough police officers to respond. And now they want me to keep that footage forever almost. And then any person in the public that wants to come in Indiana, any person in the public that wants to come in and look at it, I not only have to give them 2 chances to look at it, but I have to get an IT person, which I'd have to employ, and white out all the innocent people. When I say white them out, just
foggy faces. Yeah.
And so it's never ending, problem. And then what we have seen on body camera footage is if I'm wearing a body camera right here, a couple years ago, there was an armed man in New Albany, and the police came up, and I happened to be standing there off duty with my wife, and the police came up and confronted him because he had a firearm that he had displayed to somebody, so they tried to talk to him. He pushed them away, they dove on him, and the first thing that landed on the ground was the body camera. The second thing that happened was that body camera and the scuffle got kicked and somebody stepped on it. We spent more time trying to locate the body camera than we did making the arrest. There's problems with the whole thing. It's not the tool that everybody wants it to be. And there are some issues with it. If you see, and I don't know all the players, okay? I don't know all the players, but the last footage I saw on television, all you could see was the officer's hands in that body camera way. You couldn't see what he was seeing. So how do you make a judgment if you can't see what he's seeing? It needs to be up here, and there are some that are glasses, that are mounted on glasses, but that's a problem as well. So I don't think it's the great tool that is purported to be. So like I said, yes, wrong guy.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Mr. McElroy, I think we all recognize one of the impediments for people moving on with their lives can be felony arrests, felony convictions. I see movement in Kentucky. Indiana, several years ago, made some significant improvements where certain Class D felony convictions in Indiana can now be expunged based on a 2016 House Bill 40. How has that affected, or how do you believe that loosening up of someone in their early 20s to get a felony conviction and they're still carrying that burden when they haven't had any other contact with law enforcement or the criminal justice system 10, 15, 20 years later? How do you feel that this legislation that we have in Indiana that looks like it's going to occur in Kentucky will affect those people being able to complete their court-imposed sentence and then at some time in the future having that expunged or sealed so they can move on with their lives without that albatross around their neck?
Yeah. So, that's a good step in the right direction toward criminal justice reform. The principles that we expound this nation being founded on, one of them is forgiveness and the ability to make mistakes and move on. And yet we have a criminal justice system that incarcerates people even after incarceration, meaning that they're locked out of jobs, they're locked out of participating in their children's affairs in school systems, they're locked out. They're locked out of opportunity, locked out of possibility of readjusting and reacclimating to society. The state of Kentucky is one of 3 states that permanently takes away the right to vote. And so, when you think about voting, oftentimes we think of presidential elections, but even something as basic as how you want your trash picked up in your community is essential and is a tool that helps to reacclimate and keep a person connected to the community and society. So the slow and snail's pace in which those type of legislations are coming about to create change in the criminal justice system is hopeful, but it's so minute, because at the same time you'll see law enforcement and legislation ramp up, right? And so right now, you hear the term war on drugs. Well, right now that's being increasingly focused on heroin usage. And we're probably going to be in a phase where we're going to see that bubble expand. Just recently, the president and the federal government decided not to do any more work with private prisons. currently in our state. We're reopening private prisons. So at the same time as you see those type of incremental changes, you have more robust changes that are happening to reinforce the mass incarceration of people. And I think I wanted to speak briefly about Anita's point about history and legacy, because what we, like, I'm honored to be here at Ivy Tech, and I think about one of the stories that stands out to me about Indiana is the lynching in the Heartland, and that was the last public lynching that was legally watched and interested enough. It was a law enforcement that saved one of the young 14-year-old boys that were going to be lynched publicly. And so my father was a police officer. My sister was the very first state police officer in the state of Kentucky, female, African-American. And so I think that constant back and forth about police, right? So that lynching in the Heartland, that police officer saved that young 14-year-old boy. But the other two boys were murdered and hung right here in Indiana. And so we have this nuance of when things happen, we have to protect this system, but we know that things happen. We watch, not what the media says, but we watch the incidences time and time again of unarmed civilians murdered. And we are oftentimes see that no one is charged, that the investigation is solely on the person who was killed, whose body was destroyed, whose fathers and mothers and daughters and sisters, and all of those people who are part of the legacy of that murdered individual no longer have that person in their life. And so we don't know how to often have those conversations, even in the scope of having such a diverse group here, in which we can actually honor that a crime was committed and yet recognize the value of our police in that same conversation.
Thank you, thank you. You know, you used an expression that I cringe every time I hear it. I mentioned that I spent 13 of my 20 years mainly in drug enforcement. And that war on drugs, what a sad excuse for an approach to a really bad problem. The first kilo of cocaine I ever bought, I paid $65,000 for it. 10 years later, you business students should understand supply and demand. 10 years later, the market was flooded. 10 years of war on crime. You could buy a kilo of cocaine in Miami for $14,000. So that's what's called losing the war. Okay? That's Professor Pearson, speaking of narcotics enforcement, I know you spent a good amount of your time in LMPD in that area of law enforcement. What role do you think drugs in general play in the crime arena as a whole?
The reason, well, I spent my entire career in drug enforcement in one capacity or another. I spent 5 years as a lieutenant in the Metro Narcotics Unit. I was what you would think of as a traditional narc. And I can tell you from my experience in 22 years of police work, drugs push pretty much every other crime. Most, if not all, of the murders you hear about in Louisville and across the country are in some way, shape, or form, they can be tracked back to drugs. Whether it's one drug dealer killing another drug dealer, one drug gang going after another drug gang, somebody breaking into a house because they're drug addicted and bad things happen. So that's why I wanted to make my focus narcotics, because I like that fast pace. You know, I wanted to see the fruits of my labor right away, and I got that in narcotics. But drugs are so important and so prolific in the criminal justice system because, like I said before, they push every other crime. The reason that has caused such a problem with police and community relations is I don't think there's anybody in this room right now who can say they don't know somebody who has a problem with drugs in some way, whether it's a friend, a family member, what have you. Well, if you think about it, if you are a drug abuser, is it a crime to possess drugs? Is it a crime to possess drugs? Yes, it is. What do the police do? They enforce the law. If it's a crime to possess drugs and you're a police officer, part of your job is to act on that. If you are a drug dealer and you make your living and your job is selling drugs, is that a crime? As police officers, what do we do about crime? We enforce the law. We go after crime. Now, if you think about the dynamics of that, so many people are impacted by drugs, whether you're a drug user, you're a drug dealer, you have family or friends who are struggling with drug addiction. All that is criminal activity. Whether we like it or not, it is criminal activity. So that puts all those people at odds with the police. Not on a personal level. You know, it's not like the police hate this person or dislike that person because they're struggling with drugs. That conflict comes out of necessity. A game of cops and robbers. If people are breaking the law and you've got people who are supposed to enforce the law, there's automatic and instant and necessary conflict. And I think that creates a lot of division between the public and the police because we do things, we meddle in folks' business for a living, if you want to put it that way. But drugs really hurt the relationship between the police and the public because so much of the public has been impacted by drugs and the police go after drugs. This heroin epidemic that we're going through, the police see that in a totally different light probably than civilians. When we see things like Narcan being given away freely or distributed or police officers being mandated to carry it in their cars and use it on people who have overdosed on heroin, I'll just be honest with you, that causes a problem for police. It does. It's not that we don't want to help people, we don't want to save people, that's our job, that's what we do. But a lot of police officers have to push back on that because they see the same people over and over that they're saving from heroin overdoses with this Narcan. And their attitude is there's got to be some type of consequence to your actions. If you know, and there's actually a phenomenon now of people going out and getting these Narcan dosages, and two heroin users will sit together and one will watch the other one shoot up with Narcan in his hand. So if things go bad, he can save them. So how do you think that impacts a police officer or a police department when the things that we're trying to stop, the public does things to proliferate? So that's a problem, and drugs are always going to be a problem. As Lana was talking about this war on drugs, it can be won, I think, and a lot of people say, well, why do we even fight the war on drugs? Well, what is the other choice? I mean, I hear a lot of people say that this war on drugs is ridiculous and all we're doing is locking up people and putting them in jail, but stop and think for 1 minute. What if we don't fight that war on drugs? What happens to society? We descend into chaos. But I think it needs to be fought a different way because I've said this openly and I'll continue to say it. Once drugs cross our borders, the war is lost. We have to keep them from getting into the country because once they're in the country, it spreads out like cockroaches in the sunlight. And it spreads all across the country, it spreads all across the community. And at that point, all police officers are, we're just chasing problems. We're trying to put Band-Aids on problems and stomping out fires, but every time we stomp out one, a new one is created. So the way we're fighting the war on drugs now, it's not going to work, but it needs to be done differently, and I think we can have some significant impact. But as long as there's drug use and drug dealers and the police officers have a duty to enforce drug laws, there's always going to be that conflict, and there's always going to be, as I was talking to Chris 2X a few minutes ago, there's always going to be that next thing. There is, in police work and law enforcement, there will always be that next thing. As long as there are people breaking the law and you have police officers enforcing the law, you can always expect, at some point in time, somewhere, the next police officer involved shooting, the next high-profile police officer involved use of force, the next high-speed chase that ends in some type of unfortunate incident. As long as time continues to roll on, and there are people who break the law and people who enforce the law, these things are going to happen. It's not, it just is. This is just life. And we can't stomp these things out and say every time one of these things happens, oh, there they are again, the police are doing something bad. No, it's us doing what, as Shelton was saying a few minutes ago, what people expect us to do, what people pay us to do. At the end of the day, when the dust settles, what do you hold the police accountable for? What do you think the police are supposed to do? At the end of the day, when all the dust settles, what do you hold the police accountable for? Enforcing the laws, protecting people, protecting and serving. Well, if we do that, do you think that's going to bring us into direct conflict and contact with people who are just as determined to break the law? What do you think happens? And I'll end with this. I know I'm kind of running off at the mouth, but I was talking to Chris a few minutes ago. I ran into the situation many times. If you are a convicted felon or if you've had some issues with the law and you know you've got 10 or 15 years of jail time sitting on the shelf, so to speak, on probation, if you get in trouble again, you've got to go away and serve that time, plus whatever time you're going to get for what you're doing now. So let's say you're a young man in that situation. You've got a pocket full of dope in one pocket and a pistol in the other pocket. And here comes Rich, the police officer, walking up on you. Do you see how that can go south? Do you see how bad decisions can be made? Do you see how in the heat of the moment, when you don't have, when that person doesn't have time to stop and think, oh, what can I do? Oh, all he's thinking is, if this police officer gets his hands on me, I'm going away for 20 years at a minimum. So you see how bad decisions can happen. And that police officer doesn't know what he's walking into. So if the suspect does something hinky or unfortunate or too quick, you can see how things can go bad just like that. Just like that. And drugs is pushing all of that.
Thanks, Rich. We have some really good follow-up questions, but before we go to those, I would like to offer to the panel members any of the other questions that were asked previously, and we limited that to the individuals we asked the questions. If anyone in the panel would like to address any of the other questions that came up, please feel free to do that before we go on to the follow-up questions.
Thank you. I'd like to address the body cameras. We at Jeffersonville Police Department were utilizing the body cameras. However, that House Bill 1019, and speaking of Sheriff Luke, what he mentioned about the redaction feature, he's mentioned the whiteout, third or second parties that are not directly involved in the actual police-related information there that's happening occurring, they must be removed from that. And there were some additional expenses that were with that software of the system that we were using. We had to stop, such as other police departments around in Southern Indiana and throughout the state, we had to stop utilizing the body cameras. Well, since then, we've spoken with some of the state representatives, and we've expressed our concerns with the expansion relating to the body cameras. And I do recognize the points that Sheriff Luke did make. When are you supposed to deploy a body camera? You're out on patrol, things happen to occur, and it's immediately you stumble upon. It's officer initiated, where the officer makes an observation. Sheriff Luke made an observation of that traffic accident. That's practical, that's correct. When are you supposed to deploy that camera? I know if it's your family member, my family member, you're not stopping to turn on the camera. You're going to do everything as much as possible to get help, get the resources there along the way. However, I do understand that the footage of the body cameras, and once an incident has occurred, that outcome what we're left with, everyone wants to know. It does provide. My take on body cameras, I do support them because on the nature of, everyone now has a cell phone. Everyone now has the ability to take and record. My theory in policing, my theory when I was a shift commander here the last 8 years prior to being chief of police is, I want my perspective, I want my view, I want it told from the very beginning. Yes, I'm a police officer that, for that video, whatever I'm going to do on the video, prior to video being shot, it's going to show the entirety of it, and I'm not going to hesitate at all whatsoever. No excuses at all whatsoever. I will articulate, I will be able to explain, and that's what our officers need to be able to do. So if you see a police officer throwing a punch, then that officer's throwing that punch, it's on video, let's ask why that officer had to throw the punch, okay? Let's let that officer explain their view, why they had to throw the punch or why they had to use the force. Okay, I understand we may not agree with it, but it's on video. It has to be articulated, it has to be explained as to why, to respond to the behavior that was there present at hand. And with that being said, that's what the cameras can be used for, to utilize to show the entire story, not a part or a snippet of what we're seeing on the news, what they have the ability to show us on the news. I'm not criticizing the media, but however, sensationalism does sell, and that's their duty and their responsibility for ratings and to get that information out there.
Okay. And so we are staying until 5 o'clock, right?
I'm gonna be really quick.
These are good questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to address again, I guess what I like to say is just encourage the students again, because this is about a diversity conversation. We're in Black History Month. What I'd like to tell you all again is be willing, because Rich reminded me of something when we was coming over here, and I'll remind you again what you said. You said, sometimes you're placed in, Chris, you're placed in sticky situations. So what he meant by that was, with some of these officer-involved shootings, it's like a no-win situation. When a family calls you or talk to the police department, and it's like you can be perceived from all these different ends. But how many of you all ever, you don't have to raise your hands or anything, ever been a part or having a part of some level of discussion with an officer who's been involved in officer-involved shooting? I have, and let me tell you when it was. It was June of 2010. Remember earlier I told you all when Lonnie asked the question how I got involved in a more prominent way in some of these social issues. That was the officer-involved shooting of Mackenzie Mattingly, again, a white male detective on the Louisville Metro Police Department. This was a year into merger, when merger was founded in January of 03, and this was January of 04. And the young, again, 19-year-old black male was Michael Newby. Officer Manley got acquitted in that situation. In April of that year, he got indicted for murder. He was fired from the police department at the end of February of 2004 by then Chief Robert C. White for excessive force. Michael Newby had a weapon on him. Watch this now. But Officer Mackenzie Manley perceived a threat when he said that Michael was turning around when they had a struggle, allegedly with his service weapon, and was running away and got shot in the back 3 times. So what went into the dynamics again of officer being indicted for murder and also getting put off the force for excessive use of force, but getting acquitted in September of that year. To get to the bottom line, several years later, got a call from a LMPD captain. They don't have captains anymore. But LMPD Captain John Stills, who called me and said that Mackenzie Mattingly wanted to publicly apologize to Michael Newby's mom for taking her son's life. And I went back and relayed that message to Michael Newby's mom and dad and family. And they said, could you take the next step to sit down and have a discussion with him about what this apology would entail and what this interaction with us would entail? So we made that happen. I talked to Officer Madden almost close to 6 years later after that shooting. And I listened to him say that I can't apologize about the way that I felt in that milliseconds of a situation, the way I felt, but she lost her son. And she at least deserves from me a face-to-face interaction where I can tell her that I'm sorry for his life being taken. We almost got there, but because of some complications with other members in the family, we didn't get there. But what I'd like to encourage you and tell you all to be encouraged about is put yourselves as advocates students to your professional careers and your social advocacy efforts if you want to get in this arena. Put yourself in sticky situations. That's how you really make the difference. And don't be afraid to be a part of doing something that you can really feel grounded and good about for the betterment of everybody involved, and especially yourself.
Okay. Any other panel want to pick up on previous questions? No? Okay. I'll explain this. There's a couple of questions you all asked me that I don't know about. So if I don't get to those, it's only because I don't know what man the box is. But we may get back to that question. But one of the questions, and it comes up in the judicial area, it certainly comes up in the law enforcement area, and it comes up in the community activism area. There's an expression called the code of silence. That expression's existed at least back to the 1940s and 50s and 60s. It is generally conceived to be that attitude or that tendency on the part of police officers, good or bad police officers, to not talk about bad actions of other police officers. So the question we have here, is asking, what is any panelist member that wants to handle it, what's your opinion about this code of silence that still exists today among law enforcement?
It exists today, but again, I reiterate, it's historical. If you go back and read your history, and the reason for so much distrust in minority communities and people of color is because historically police have brutalized, murdered, done whatever they wanted to in these communities. It went unchecked, unpunished in the court system. Am I right, Judge Vicki Carmichael?
Yes.
Therefore, it's generational, and it has persisted, and it still persists until today. That's one reason I emphasize communication and dialogue, because we can't go back and change the history. But moving forward, we can start taking those steps to bring about better trust and understanding.
I want to jump in there real quick. So last year in Metro Louisville, there was 118 criminal homicides. It was a record since the 70s. Almost 400 individuals end up getting wounded by gunfire. And the constant question that has went on for several years since Ferguson, Baltimore, Minnesota, Dallas, Texas, when officers were ambushed in Dallas, and got ambushed in Baton Rouge. Individuals got killed, like Shelton said, as it relates to, stops in situations where it was questionable use of force by officers. The one question that always, and in a continuous way, will come up, out of all of these shootings that occur, especially in the predominantly black areas of most cities, why do individuals come out as it relates to having massive gatherings and massive protests when there's an officer-involved shooting against a African-American person or a black person, especially black males in the community? It goes back to what Anthony is talking about. It's a historical thing. That, yes, you have these black-on-black shootings, per se, and you don't see maybe at some level the same enthusiasm as far as massive protests about why are you all killing each other in our neighborhoods. You do have that kind of distaste for what's going on in different ways in the neighborhoods, but every time you have an officer-involved interaction, it's a historical connectedness to a situation where, unfortunately, race will always trump how people perceive an officer-involved shooting, especially if it's a white officer and a black citizen in a community. How race will trump that situation over the massive situations that are happening in the black community with black-on-black violence towards each other. So I know it's hard to understand sometimes, but sometimes you have to grasp in your own mind what makes a person think like that. What makes a person think that you should be putting more energy into protesting 118 homicides, 400 individuals getting wounded by gunfire, and you don't put that same energy in massive protests like you would do one officer-involved shooting. But it goes back in a historical way, like Anta said, to how people have perceived their interactions with the police department over the years. So it's a lot of work to be done in those areas, again, for coexistence.
Any other panelists want to address the code of silence issue? Okay.
The code of silence is not just police. I acknowledge that's there, but send the police into any neighborhood, and how come they're not telling the police who did the shootings? That's an issue. But the code of silence is, you have a burglary in a neighborhood, and you go door to door. Somebody saw it, but they don't want to get involved. So it's not just about the police department and that type of thing. It's people. And people they're afraid to be involved. They're afraid that they may have to testify. They're afraid they're going to get threatened. And so, yeah, it's there. If I knew how to fix it, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. it's an issue. You know, talking to homicide detective Ogle not too long ago, and a major told me something I thought was astounding, that 80% of the murders in Louisville last year, 80% of them came back to 10 guns. 10. Which means that those 10 guns are being traded. Now, I just want to ask this question. I'm not from here. I was born and raised in upstate New York. Dairy farm,
We're not gonna hold
you know,
that
whatever,
against you.
yeah. Okay, but has it ever dawned on anybody, why is there such a divide and there's so much crime in Louisville, but if you cross the bridge, it dramatically drops? What's the difference? What is that? What is the
Yeah, I was over there, Frank. I think there's been a long, let me say this, perception that's been created that in the state of Indiana, the penalties, and this is a running conversation within especially urban neighborhoods in Metro Louisville, that the state of Indiana is really, really adamant about the way that they punish offenses. And that's been for decades. That if you cross into southern Indiana, there's a high penalty to pay for the same actions that you might create in Metro Louisville. And they feel in Metro Louisville that there's this consensus within the judicial arena that through collaborating with good criminal lawyers and then good advocate groups who will always, at some level, say that these punishments are too harsh as it relates to especially the conditions that most of the people who live in the urban communities come out of, that it's well noted within the judicial arena in Metro Louisville that there's always, like Sheldon was talking about, that the country was founded on second chances. You get the second and third chance in Metro Louisville, where in southern Indiana, you might not get the same chance as it relates to committing the same horrific offenses.
You're exactly right. It is a revolving door over there.
If you don't mind, Chief Kavanaugh, when we opened up the walking bridge, I think we had a spillover. Would you like to join this discussion at all about that? Are we closing the walking bridge anytime soon?
No, not. But I'll reflect back this all prior to my years of in law enforcement, being a narcotics detective. We would be working with narcotics. Never had experience working directly with retired Lieutenant Pearson, but we work with other narcotics detectives. We would utilize the exit zero ramp coming into Jeffersonville. Judge Carmichael would see many of those cases, the prosecutors. The Thorntons, the McDonald's, 5 o'clock, the Waffle and Steak, that as far as we could get some of the dealers that were coming over. They would only come over to southern Indiana, but that was it. They would come to exit zero and they would only want to arrive at those locations specifically because they would not want to get far away from the bridge. They would make it back over across, but just to let you know, in that theory and thought, the mentality was I would come to Indiana, exit zero, that's it, we'll do the deal, back over. Anything, I'm driving off. That was repeated, and we knew once I became a narc and started working in the field, I realized after 6 months, individuals coming from Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, didn't matter the race, they only were going to come to that Court Avenue corridor. That was it. Those 3 locations, we would do the deal, the transaction, some of the management, some of the national change management. They did not like us utilizing their locations, and we found that out. I was in the chief's office a few times, but however, we were making the cases, and we did those in a safe and conducive manner to take those individuals off the street and effect the proper arrest in case.
Was that good urban planning that the McDonald's and the Waffle House are not there anymore?
Well, yeah, let's just say you're correct.
Okay. Last question. Oh, go ahead.
So I think it's urban planning, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So urban planning is the reason. I think we're talking apples and oranges when we're trying to make some kind of comparison of Louisville urban area to Jeffersonville, Indiana. No offense to Jeffersonville, Indiana, but the populations are totally different. You don't have project housing that is almost 100 buildings strong that for multiple generations of poverty have been immersed on top of. You don't have an entire western community of Jefferson County that has a 9th Street divide that says we're not going to do any kind of economic development across this street and have the expectation that you're going to have an enriched community come out of that, right? So you have urban planning, policymakers that have intentionally decided that we're going to cordon off certain areas of the community, allow those to be beds of crime and poverty, and create safety and have police protect and serve these and respond to these communities, but create safe cul-de-sacs for us to walk down Bardstown Road and Frankfurt Avenue and the walking bridge. And then when the police are called into these other communities, it's a responsive thing. It's not protecting the kids that are walking to school. So, I mean, to make that comparison is fallacy. The perception about hard on crime versus, I mean, Gary, Indiana versus Indianapolis versus Jeffersonville, that's apples and oranges. You can't compare those two. Louisville has a history of ostracization and economic disenfranchisement in the West End and in South Louisville, Portland, and I mean, look, we didn't build KFC Young Center on Main Street in the Portland and Shawnee area. We could have. We could have built the Veterans Hospital on Broadway, but we didn't, right? Because what happens if we do, then we create investment opportunity in the urban core for people to have jobs and have opportunities outside of drug dealing. So, like, one of the things that's troublesome about these conversations, like, if you see as a 10-year-old murder after murder after murder in the Park Hill community, and you see violence perpetuated in every shape or form, including police violence, and that's all you see. And then to imagine that somehow this young person is supposed to supersede, and we see, you know, individuals do that, but I mean collectively to supersede those environmental factors and be the best citizen and cross the bridge to Jeffersonville and not, you know, participate in inappropriate and criminal activity. It's behooving that in a hall of higher education, we don't have the capacity to understand how crime and criminal activity is created.
Thank you, Sean. That's been a really